Well, Neon Indian is finally here in Shanghai, and it will be my first time to hear him perform live. So let's go talk to the guy and see what are his experiences in music, art, and life.
Cultural identity other than that place, then I feel like it would have been a much broader leap to, to go anywhere outside of the States and like travel as a musician.
Alan Palomo, the creator of the band Neon Indian, was born in Mexico and raised in Texas. He has been on the music scene since 2008 and has made 3 studio albums so far. With well-received reviews for the album Psychic Chasms, the Rolling Stone magazine also named Neon Indian as the best new band of 2010. Now with his 3rd album out, Vega International Night School, Splitwork has also invited Neon Indian to come and perform at the QSW Culture Center here in Shanghai. What are your thoughts and stories on art, music, and life?
To me, they're intrinsically the same thing, right? I mean, like, when I think about what makes me happy, typically happens in the act of making something. Like, all the auxiliary things that happen as a result of making something, like having a career in the arts, success, however you define that in a personal way, I would say is like kind of totally irrelevant. Those things are just there to like pacify you. People try to talk about happiness as if it's like this like perpetual state that is like imperturbable and that you'll be there. Once you achieve it, it'll just stay there. But I think that like a more realistic life perspective is just kind of being like, yeah, you've got like this whole, complicated soup of high highs and lows, and obviously what creates the value system of something like happiness is that it is transient, and for me, like when I find those moments, it really kind of seem to sell the rest of it, as part of this package deal of what you're going to get, as far as like the life that you've been dealt with. It totally happens when I'm making art, totally happens when I'm making music, and that to me is like, it's the whole point of it.
So what does it mean to be an indie artist, and what are some of the challenges you have to face?
I think one expectation that was sort of placed upon me when I was in the throes of making the record was the modern, like, indie artist, whatever that means now, It's like ultimately, there's an expectation to be prolific and to have constant output, and I feel like because of the internet being this great equalizer that gives everyone the same exposure platform, there's so much more music out there right now. It's not about maintaining a career in the arts so much as it is maintaining an integrity in what made them interesting to begin with, And I think it's easy to lose sight of that at times. You kind of find yourself in these scenarios where opportunities present themselves and, you want to keep the ball rolling. But, the older I get, the less appealing that is. I think initially making something that warrants its own existence and remembering what it is about you that would set yourself apart from, the other things that are out there, and being in tune with what's interesting about your work, and really, as you go on, learning to distill that,
Just stay true to yourself.
Yeah, totally, for sure, yes. Yeah, I picked like a 15-minute version of basically just being like, just be true to yourself, totally.
Raised in a family where his dad was a pop star in Mexico, and a brother having a passion for music, Alan actually studied film in college, but it was also when he discovered his own passion for music. What does music mean to you, and why do you do it?
Well, I would say I grew up in a very musical family. My dad had put out a couple of records in like the late 70s and early 80s, but yeah, I feel like it wasn't until high school that my relationship with music really changed, from it being this thing that was always kind of around, and maybe that I was taking for granted just because it was like part of the environment by which I grew up in. But I remember there were a couple of bands and a couple of songs that really just sort of put that idea in my head, and specifically made me like obsessed with electronic music. Like it was less so about wanting to like sit down at a piano and be like, yeah, I'm gonna write a song. It was like more about like really interested specifically in dance music and how it works and what's interesting about it, because I feel like so much of dance music, club culture is kind of more about the aesthetic than it is about like the composition itself. you know, I just kind of tumbled down the rabbit hole, and then just a couple years later in college was when I finally started making music.
So what are the stories behind your songs, and what are you trying to reflect?
Yeah, sometimes the songs are somewhat like autobiographical, but as somebody who didn't have like a formal music background, just kind of like what I absorbed from, you know, watching, you know, my brother and my dad. Initially, when I started making music, I had to tackle it through like a vocabulary that I did understand, which was what I was studying in school and what I'd always been passionate about. So it was like film, you know, and it was more about mood and, you know, tone and general feel than it was about like, oh, what key the song is in and what's the tempo, you know. It's like, it was always kind of more like textural and sort of story driven, and it's only now like gotten, you know, so much more specific, to the extent that by the time that I actually got to, you know, direct the music video, I feel like all of these ideas have been bubbling for the past couple of years, and finally wanting to be like, all right, well, I can't present you the music anymore without giving you like the visual statements that coincide with it, you know.
Music and film had always gone hand in hand, so for Neon Indian, the art of filmmaking has also influenced their musical journey.
Can you tell me about the music video of Slumlord? What are you trying to reflect there or say?
It was ultimately meant to be like an example of, so the premise behind the Slumlord video was to have like an excerpt from what would feel like a film scene or the climax of a movie, without giving you any of the explanation as to like what the backstory was around it. 8-minute example of what Big International Night School, you know, was always kind of bubbling in my mind as. As far as like what it means, it's like not meant to be too literal. You know, it was more about like making sure that all these different archetypes from, not just from like a lot of the movies that I was very like steeped in, but just kind of general archetypes that you would see in any sort of story that seems to have this feel to it, right? You know, so there's a lot of like B-horror in there, and wanting to find this intersection between the two things of being like, oh, well, all these movies are known for being a little bit more highbrow. All the trauma stuff is definitely like total lowbrow, you know, but there's this world in which the two can conflate into something just kind of strange and gross and beautiful. And yeah, that was kind of the intent.
What a perfect combination of music and film, both being able to tell you a story through sight and sound.
Well, that was a really cool concert. I personally felt like I was taken away in an electro-wave dreamland throughout the night. I guess being indie is not so indie after all when you have fans around the world. This is Christine, reporting for City Beat.